Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to the legend of PikVille Heavy Industries, a chronicle of how one ordinary Tempe kid stumbled into an extraordinary destiny. A story of desert submarines, time-bent encounters, improbable mentors, and the strange, stubborn belief that the universe sometimes taps you on the shoulder long before you know why. These are the memories, misfires, and miracles that built PHI, told one episode at a time, straight from the source. If you know, you know. And if you don't, well, you're about to. Episode 1. The Afternoon the Desert Shifted. Middle of October 1978. I'd just turned 16, landed my first real job, bussing tables at Casa de Zorro on Broadway, the kind of place where the chips were always hot and the busboys had the scars to prove it. Yet it still beat wearing the Zorro costume. With my birthday money, I'd bought a surprisingly nice tape recorder, though I couldn't have told you why. A couple of weeks later, I brought it to work. Again, for no clear reason. Like something in the back of my mind was nudging me toward it. That was the night Mayor Harry Mitchell walked into the restaurant. And for reasons I still can't explain, I walked right up to him and asked if I could test out my new recorder by interviewing him for a school project. Of course he agrees, because Harry Mitchell was that kind of mayor. Approachable, unhurried, and always willing to talk Tempe with anyone who cared enough to ask. I start with a couple of questions about redevelopment on the 400 block of Mill Avenue, trying to sound like I knew what I was doing. He answers patiently, then casually swats down the rumor going around that the new city building, the upside-down pyramid, was somehow draining power from Terminal 1 at Sky Harbor. After that warm-up, I launch into a string of questions about something I barely understood. The Rio Salado project. I'd only heard about it from my Uncle Michael, who said some of his classmates in the ASU drafting program had cooked up the original concept. But once I started asking, I couldn't stop. Something about that dry riverbed and the idea of turning it into something had already hooked me, even if I didn't know why. The way I understood it back then, the Rio Salado project was supposed to be huge. A full regional waterway running from Mesa straight through Tempe and Phoenix, eventually tying into the Central Arizona project, and from there, the CAP would carry it all the way to the mighty Colorado. I didn't grasp the engineering or the politics, not at 16, but the idea of turning that dry, dusty riverbed into something alive and connected to the rest of the West felt impossibly big. Bigger than anything I'd ever asked a mayor about, that's for sure. It was the day after Thanksgiving, and because the Territorial Cup was being played down in Tucson, I decided, for reasons I still can't explain, to drive out to the riverbed behind Sun Devil Stadium and listen to the game on my car radio. I'd never done that before, and I've never done it since. I was sitting alone in that dry stretch of dirt and junk, dry as a bone, but wouldn't be in just a few short months, when I saw it, a shimmering ripple, or maybe a rippling shimmer, something that didn't belong in a riverbed at all. Before I could make sense of it, a small but unmistakably military-looking submarine pushed its way up through the ground like it had every right to be there. I was stunned, frozen, trying to decide whether to run or blink harder. When the hatch opened, a man climbed out, dropped down beside me, snapped a crisp salute, and said, "Hi, boss, do you have the tape for me?" And of course I did. It was in my pocket, though I had no memory of putting it there. I handed it over without a word. He thanked me, saluted again, and said, "Until we meet again, boss," before disappearing back into the vessel. ASU won the game 18-17. Fast forward to March of 1980. The winter flooding had finally pulled back, leaving Tempe with something it hadn't seen in years. A real river running through the salt riverbed. I went down there at 17, still a kid in most ways, but already leaning toward whatever came next. Planning to walk the bank with my adorable girlfriend and make her laugh by asking if she wanted to watch the submarine races. But the evening didn't stay innocent for long. By the time we left, the river wasn't the only thing that had changed. I walked in as a boy and walked out a man, carrying a half-baked plan I didn't fully understand, and a sense that something enormous had just shifted in my life. The innocence was gone, replaced by a strange certainty. Someday, somehow, I was going to build submarines in the desert. I somehow knew I couldn't go the engineering route in college. Not because I didn't want to, but because something in me understood it just wasn't an option. My grades would have backed that up, sure, but it felt deeper than that, like the universe was nudging me toward a different kind of education. So I went the practical route instead. I got a job on the lube rack at Ray Cordy Chevrolet, learning the smell of hot oil and the rhythm of real work. Then I headed to college for what I called practical training in religions and cultural anthropology, because of course that made sense at the time. The real business education came later, when my parents and I built a car repair shop from scratch and grew it into a near $1 million a year operation. The car shop on Broadway is still going strong today, even though we sold it back in the mid to late 80s. And in 1987, I started a fantasy football league that doubled as a front to codify the proprietary propulsion system. You could say we had a very elaborate scoring system. That league is still running, too, carrying the code forward year after year. I even tried my hand at aviation, starting a little airplane detailing outfit called Arizona Air Maids. But somehow word got out that I was a water guy, and that was the kiss of death in a business where people prefer their aircraft bone dry. I never landed a single job. What I did land was my first encounter with Jerry Latchford, an FAA inspector who tried to write me up for putting flyers on windshields at the Scottsdale Air Park. At the time, I thought he was just a grumpy bureaucrat having a bad day. How was I supposed to know that, thanks to the way time machines like to fold the deck, I'd already met him much earlier, or would meet him much earlier? Depending on how you chart the timeline, chronology gets slippery when submarines start surfacing in the desert. Whew, that was a ride and a half. And we're only at the first mile marker. The desert's awake now, the gears are turning, and episode 2 is already a glowing shimmer. Or is that a shimmering glow? Find out on the next episode of The Legend of PikVille Heavy Industries. Stay heavy, man.